Cameron Stewart, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Do you have anything secrety on your background? Because it shows all the numbers and all that whiteboard. So anybody who's on YouTube or Spotify,
Yeah,
take your
yeah.
screenshots right now.
Exactly. No, this is just to make me look smart.
Yeah, and just to show that you work from the office.
That's right. That's right.
All right, let me do a quick introduction. So, Cam, you're a group vice president at SciPlay, and talking about social casino market. So SciPlay is one of the leading companies in social casino, and social casino is not a small business. I mean, most of our listeners, I'd say a portion of our listeners understand how social casino is. I think Monopoly Go made it clear to everybody that it's pretty big of a genre.
Right.
But even looking at last year, we're talking about on mobile. This is Sensor Tower data. So net revenue was about 6.5 billion. It was up 14% year over year on downloads. On revenue, and then downloads were 1.4 billion, up by about 3%. So pretty much the same. And most importantly, average revenue per install is almost $5 in social casino. So, not surprisingly, a very well monetizing genre. And final interesting part that I find about this genre is not only how well you monetize, retain, and run live operations, which is what we're going to talk about, is the level of concentration, which is really low. So we've kind of accustomed to like there's a couple of games that dominate a genre, like Candy Crush and Royal Match, and that's pretty much it. Everybody else is distant second. In social casino, the level of concentration is extremely low compared to other genres. So if you take two biggest titles, put them together, they make about 10% of the market, which
Yep.
is a stark difference to any other genre. So did I get it right about social casino?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the thing that we want to get across, and I think that's the thing that we've been, almost debating in the last few years. Like, hey, when you guys going to do more games? And we absolutely are doing more games, but when you look at a market of social casino being probably 8-9 billion a year, it's I mean it's a huge market, and there's a lot of opportunity to gain even more market share in this market. And I think for the last 3 years, SciPlay's shown a great job in doing so, but we're hungry for more. So
Yeah. And talking about hungry for more and talking about being good at what you do. I remember Joshua Wilson, your CEO, came here at least a couple of times, has been on the podcast.
yeah,
And every time he's come in, he's talked about like, well, you've been really successful. And not like just according to him. It was a public company and now you're part of another public company. So these are like actual numbers that we were
right,
discussing, growing quarter over quarter. IDFA, cool, we got this. No idea, like
yeah.
before, after, and just kept on growing. And so I think this podcast is really interesting, and what I wanted to have you here on is like just a simple question, which is how do you retain and monetize?
That's the golden question, right? Like that
Yeah,
you
I
ask
mean,
everybody.
I wanted to start with something really like really, really simple.
Look, I think from from our perspective, we look at things very differently. I think 5 years ago, and I think a lot of companies, still may think this way, but they look to the next big bold feature, right? We've all heard that term from different companies, and we've never been the type of company that has really grown that way. Now, again, 5+ years ago, you could grow that way where you're launching the big feature of the quarter, and all of a sudden you see 5, 6, 7% rev growth. We really 3, 4 years ago sat down and said that that's not how we're going to grow anymore. Especially on a game like Jackpot Party that's
Mhm.
10+ years old. You need to invest in your systems. You need to invest in your talent of your team. You need to invest in the things that are, I guess, the non-sexy things that a
Yeah.
player would see. And we've gone from, I think we've kind of dominated this market in segmentation, but really we go down to personalization is kind of where we're at now. So we've done a big investment in the operation of our games versus just creating the next best feature.
Interesting. So at this point, especially segmentation, you've so let me put it this way. I talked a lot to different studios. I talk a lot to different service providers in terms of lifetime value optimization, and they pitch their segmentation. Look at our calendar tool, look at how the segments you can build.
Yeah.
And when I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, it looks nice when you start off with kind of nothing. And then I'm imagining like the type of games that you guys run are 10 years old and, getting older.
Yep.
And so what does the segmentation look like when you have a game, even that is like, let's say 3 years old? How many
Yeah.
segments you have running at the same time? And how do you modify those segments when you have a demographic or user base that is, somewhat changing? Of course, you're stacking your cohorts one on top of another, but nevertheless, like your user base is changing as you're progressing through time. And so do you change the segmentation? Does the first time flow that you had there was like not even the first time flow, but different segments that would change based on user behavior that you knew were 2 years ago? How does it work right now? And now you have to go to change it. It looks like a circuit board. Anyway, like how do you what is can you just talk about like moving from segmentation to personalization?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, segmentation can be a double-edged sword. As wieldy as it can be, it can also sink you pretty fast too. And so I think the first part is we're very strategic by every lever that we pull. And so now you got to have a system to be able to pull those levers, of course. But our systems are made in together with, product and engineering. It wasn't just, one person or two people that came up with the idea. It was using data to really make these segments and to pull these levers. And ultimately, segmentation is important to the person or the machine that is running behind it. And so it's a big shout out to our talent at SciPlay and how we train our talent, because ultimately the person or the thing pulling the levers is critical there. And so we've invested heavily in that side of the business, and we're very strategic and careful about what levers we pull.
And in practice, like how does personalization look like? Is it, let's say, users come in and based on their behavior, the difficulty of the machines changes. Let's say I'm playing slot and you can see through my behavior if I'm about to churn or not. You might tweak the machine so I'm more likely to get a win or less likely to get a win. Certain types of machines open up in different order based on like what does a personalization look like?
Yeah. Here, since you touched on, the machines and the
Yeah.
slots, like, you know, it's no secret that, we are a content company, with Light and Wonder, right? We have some of the best content, in the entire industry, and that it's a huge, advantage, for us. Now, we are true to that. So we do not touch the machines. Like, we're a number of slot players ourselves, right? So we're very true to not creating differences between the actual machines. We're very true to that. And so, however, everything else around the slot machine, those are the things that we're touching. And so we're using a number of different trigger points to say, hey, this user is fairly likely to have this behavior. Okay, I know exactly what path I need to take them on next. And so we're constantly trying to get the user to really retain, engage, and monetize. Obviously, that's the circle. But I think on the SciPlay side, we're a little bit different in the fact of, like, I think you've seen this before. A lot
Hmm.
of product managers are like, "How can I go get $1?" In our way of thinking, it's more like, "How can I get the player to have a good time?" Day over day, week over week, month over month, year over year. We will always trade retention and engagement, on the longer term success rather than monetization, and I think that's at the core of how we think.
Kick ass live ops need kick ass tools. That's where Heroic Labs comes in. They just released a massive update to their Satori live ops platform. And having done my research, I can say with confidence that it's second to none. In a single product, you get everything you need, including Event capture, player segmentation, feature flags, remote configuration, A/B testing, experimentation, live events calendar, messaging, retention graphing, analytics, and so much more. If you're serious about running live services in a game, get serious about the tools you use. Connect with Heroic Labs and make some serious cheese with your live ops.
And when we're talking about retention, essentially when we're talking about KPIs, like this is what I'm really interested in, is kind of like the I don't know, the way I see it is there's the old school way of looking at KPIs, which is like my day 1, my day 7, my day 30,
Yeah.
And then you put in
Yep.
like a percentage number there. And then I don't know, again, I don't know if this is new school or old school, but usually, like, let's say if I'm working with somebody, I try to get away from that quite
Yep.
quickly and start looking at cohorts. Like, I want to see LTV accumulation cohort over time, over months, where I can start looking at the shapes of the curves. And then I feel like these sort of individual numbers, almost like somebody's trying to bamboozle me, or even
Yeah.
worse, they don't even know better, which is, or even
Absolutely.
better. Actually, that's even better because then you can advise them. But how do you guys look at it? Because you're like, that your games retain because they've
Yep.
been out for such a long time,
Yep.
and people like slots, whether you like it or not. They like bingo. Like, these are
Yep.
proven mechanics. It's not like, surprise, what is this?
Absolutely. Yep.
So how do you look at these KPIs? Like, in your job, like, do you open up a dashboard and says, what's D1? And do I need to connect with a GM because
Yeah.
D1 is a little bit low and figure out? Or
Yeah.
like, how do you look at it?
Look, I think there's a couple different ways I'll answer that. Number one, we have a luxury of having 6 social casino games in the top 30. So we're constantly using ourselves as our own proving ground, right? And we're learning from each other, and I think that's a super special thing that we have here at SciPlay. I think the other thing is that we're constantly trying to evolve, right? It is not our culture to say, "Hey, I've tested that thing 2 years ago. This is how it works." Like, we have a lot of people going, "Yeah, but why did it work? Why did you do it that way? Should we test it again? Oh, I want to come up with a different like." We really, I can tell you, I've tested the same thing 8 times over the last 3 years because our players and their habits change dramatically, and so nothing is ever set in stone here at SciPlay. And then I think third, it's very important that we're players ourselves. Anybody can look at data and make a hypothesis, but if you don't feel the game yourself, if you're not reaching out to your players and understanding how they feel, if you're not, again, that player yourself, like, how are you supposed to feel that you know quest completion percentage was 7%? Is that good? Is that bad? How did you feel when you ran out of coins? There's so many questions that you have to constantly ask yourself as the player, and I think that is still the thing that we see a lot, that we have to almost train people out of, is if you can't feel it yourself, it's really hard to understand what the data is actually trying to tell you.
That's a fascinating point,
Yeah.
because when you think about social casino companies, you would think about that these guys are probably numbers overall. It's like they don't
Yeah.
care anything at all. They probably never even seen a slot machine. I bet they don't even go to, to Vegas
Yeah,
or
right.
Macau or anybody. They just sit in front of a computers and just look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And what you're essentially describing is like, this was even back in like a super like 2013. Oh, already was that there's 3 sources of data that you have to follow, and the one source is, of course, the data analytics, the
Yep.
numbers, and you have the data scientists, and they pull something
Yep.
very interesting out of the game and bring different types of insights. The second part is the qualitative data, whether that is community, whether those are the interviews, like however you can engage with your players and understand how they feel, especially the most engaged ones. That's a very important source of information. And then there's the
Absolutely.
third part that you talked about, which is the gut feeling of the developer. And that's the
Sure.
expertise of the person working on it. And it is quite common, especially on mobile side, And we kind of like, your gut feeling. Let me show you a couple of numbers. Like, screw your gut
Absolutely.
feeling. And
Yep.
and
Yep.
it seems like at SciPlay, you're like, yeah, this is super important because we are like in any gaming company, like we are masters at what we do. We like what we
Absolutely.
do, and we have to trust also our gut feeling because numbers or interviews don't tell the full picture.
And I think it's important to talk about because like we've seen this countless a number of times is like you have to be, I think the most important thing is that you have to be willing to change the way that you think in this market.
Mm-hmm.
We've worked with a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of people in the industry, and um, if you haven't changed the way that you make games 3 years ago, like you're probably failing in this space right now. And I don't mean that to be harsh at all. Like it's, you just have to change with the way the industry changes. And I think COVID drastically changed how players played our games. And we had to adapt to that. And that's why we've, changed, certain things within our org. That's why we've changed certain ways on how we operate. And it really comes down to how you operate a game, not for necessarily, again, going back to just the next big bold beat feature. So
Hmm. And talking about like, well, before we talk about like, I'm very interested in talk about your live operations and how you run it. But before that, just overall like monetization strategies, like how do you ensure that you have effective monetization, but not too effective that it would cause the churn of the users?
yeah, look, monetization is an interesting term for us because I think when you use the phrase monetization, you think,
Hmm.
oh, payment, right? Monetization for us is like retention and engagement first. And so, the number of, again, tools and levers that we're using, they're most of them are around retention and engagement, and monetization will eventually flow through.
Hmm.
And so, we have a very robust, monetization team here. We made the switch um, probably almost 3 years ago now, where we've separated product, into two departments, one being monetization and one being, more feature development, product ownership. And so I think that was an amazing switch for us because it really put monetization and live ops with a front seat at the table rather than just making live ops a piece of product development.
Hmm.
um, and so when we made that shift, like it's very, very important that the director of product and director of monetization are seriously tied at the hip, making the right decisions for the game.
Interesting. So 2 points here. So retention and engagement first. Like, what are the metrics that you're looking at in terms of retention and engagement? Like, what are the sort of north stars here? Session counts or session lengths
Yeah,
or?
so for us, depending on each individual game, it's a little bit different, right? I think when we look at, the to design our product roadmap or our user journey, we're constantly looking at, okay, where is this game set up from a session over session base? Where are they set up from a daily base and a 3 day base and a 7 day base? And so, we're ultimately filling in those gaps and using our different KPIs, such as, if you want to go to the early user journey, like how does a user
Mhm.
progress to D30? But then ultimately taking those cohorts and understanding, okay, you had a great D30, but how are you progressing from D30 to D180, right? And so, you're starting there, but you're also making sure that your product has the levers and the features that are showing up in the different, week over week, month over month. I think that's critical to how we design and implement our features and monetization strategy.
Yeah, I just happened yesterday to talk to a former CTO of a casino, social casino company, and he was explaining this as well. Like the key to retention is content, and the key to content is progression, and basically, like you have to have these certain nodes in the game. Whether, let's say, for an example, like you have a player level, or you have like in Candy Crush, you have your level, and then that allows you to follow the player's progression, and then that
Absolutely.
information is the one that allows you to start optimization of the game, because you know the path, and now you can personalize the path once you've set the path. But if that path is like nebulous, like let's say even in a competitive shooter game, that becomes quite hard.
Right.
So
Right. Well, Matt, I always try and, analyze things of, how we can bring things to like real life, right? I think sometimes we forget that we make games for people, right? A lot of games have a very similar journey for each person, and if you think of just people in general, like every single person in this world has a very different journey. And so
mm,
you have to give very different journey for your players as well, because that's going to make them most successful. If I said, Mishka, that you have to do something a certain way in your life, you're probably going to revolt and do it a different way. Right. And so
no, I'm very
we're,
obedient.
yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. And so like this is the way that we think, like we laugh about it a lot
Right.
because we often forget that we make games for real people, so
No.
Step into the future of game monetization with Xsolla, the premier partner for game developers seeking to expand their reach and revenue. Xsolla provides a robust suite of tools designed to enhance user acquisition, manage subscriptions, and streamline payment solutions worldwide. Unlock new markets and maximize profitability through their customized, secure payment architecture and dedicated support team. Xsolla, powering game developers to achieve global success.
And so the other part that you mentioned was this notion of not notion, the decision to separate monetization and feature development on the product side.
Yep.
How does this? So let me understand. Let me
Yep.
say let me say if I understand this correctly. You
Yeah.
got your feature development, which is, let's say, different machines, or they could be well, events, kind of everything goes. Well, let's put it this way: machines. So you create different machines, and that is the feature development work, and you have a product person for that. And then the monetization part, which is in live operations. So that's what's different this week, what's different today, what kind of events are we running, how are we segmenting different offers, different, like is that the way of thinking?
I'll say it a little bit differently. Is like,
Yeah.
our product development team is really focused on the gaps and opportunities for the 6 month plus vision of the game, right? So kind of your typical, product team, right? They're constantly saying, hey, you know what? And we look at it kind of two different ways. We're saying, hey, we've got a gap where we don't have a good 3 day loop in the game. Okay, do our KPIs show that versus some of our internal products or things that we see in the rest of the industry? And then we're ultimately looking for those gaps and opportunities on a number of different KPIs. Um, our monetization team is really the day in day out, making sure that the calendar is created, making sure that the sales and the journey of the user that they're going to take that day, the quest, like the things that are in and out of the game quickly. And so, but it's very important that these two people are working very closely
Hmm.
together, because when product is developing, the next feature, we need to make sure that we have all the levers and the systems in place to be able to operate that. And I think, again, 5+ years ago, it was all about, hey, we're going to take an MVP, type feature. We're going to A/B test it for multiple months, and then we'll add live ops into it one piece at a time. Um, we really think about it differently, and we go, how are we going to operate this feature on day one? And we need to make sure that we have the systems and the mechanics in place to be able to operate that. Users 5 years ago like have a very different expectation today than they used to. And so you have to be, I mean, look at even new games that launch.
Hmm.
You can't just launch with a store, a Fatui. Like, remember, games used to launch very bare bones
Yeah.
back in the day. Now you have to have like everything, which is why it's so hard, in my opinion, to release a new game, because it takes multiple years of development to have all those things. And then, we could talk about the user acquisition cost that it costs to play in this market nowadays. But it's you have to remember to retrain and rethink your brain for what we have today, which is very different.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because like we used to run and build at the same time. Like you just release the
Yeah, we
game,
did. Yeah, yeah,
and then you just like, yeah, it's kind of, core loop is working, so let's just
yeah.
start putting stuff in. And now that gets you killed immediately.
Like we have a term internally, like you got to be right 4 out of 5 times. And if you don't think that thing is ready for day one, then honestly, we'll put it back on the shelf and make sure that it is ready for day one. Because let's be honest, development is not cheap, right? And so,
No.
but that's how we run our businesses, like it's our own money, right? And so the GMs, of our games, like they truly operate it like that. And I think that's what makes us special. And if they don't have a good confidence level that they aren't going to be right 4 out of 5 times, like that's just kind of ingrained into our blood. So
Hmm.
This podcast is brought to you by AppsFlyer. In today's digital world, understanding your app's journey from discovery to download is more than just insightful, it's essential. Enter AppsFlyer, the leader in mobile attribution and marketing analytics that allows you to measure the full potential of your marketing efforts, making every ad dollar work smarter. With AppsFlyer, that's your new reality. Dive deep into data-driven insights that reveal exactly where your users come from and how they'll interact with your app. AppsFlyer, where your app's potential meets performance.
80% hit rate. So
yeah,
talk to me about this. Development is not cheap. What is your
yeah.
team sizes? Like in a mature social casino game, we're talking about hundreds of people.
Yeah, so SciPlay wide, we're about 900 employees.
Mhm.
But on our typical games, Jackpot Party being our largest game, is upwards of 100 individuals.
Okay.
And so and most of our development for that game is actually where the company started in Iowa. And so being somebody that's homegrown in Iowa as well, like people always ask us like, hey, what, like why do you still have the Iowa studio, like? And it's like, dude, we created an amazing company there, and it's the heart and blood of what we do. And we've had a lot of success in that studio, and we'll continue investing in that studio because it's just full of an amazing group of side players, and being that kind of Midwest attitude, just full of just amazing people. So
It's as Midwest as you can go. Like it's the definition of Midwest, because like I bet people don't even know what the capital of Iowa is. I like for some crazy reason.
I bet you don't know how to say it.
Well, this is Des Moines.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Because this is just absolutely, because our kindergarten teacher here in Finland, super far away. So the head of kindergarten, this young lady, she's
Yeah.
married to an American man who
Okay.
happens to be from Iowa, Des Moines.
What? That's crazy.
That's how I know. Yeah, because like every time we have like these, like the get-togethers with the kindergarten and whatnot, and I talk to the, like he thinks I'm American because of my accent, so he gravitates towards
Mhm.
my accent.
Right.
and
That's
I've
amazing.
learned that he's from Des Moines. So yes, Iowa. That's fascinating. Okay,
Yeah.
so. And many questions that I have here, but like
Yeah,
one of the
please.
things I remember that when we were talking with Joshua, like maybe a year or so ago, like he talked about these 6 elements that your company has been investing, and one of them is, of course, this data-driven agility that you're talking
Yep.
about. So segmentation to personalization, being able to really make decisions in real time, which is that a good thing to make decisions real time or not? Actually, that question. That sounds reactive.
Yeah, no. I think I said it earlier in the interview, but it can be a double-edged sword, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
as long as you're making the correct decisions in real time, yes, it can be a very, very effective way to run a business.
Yeah.
But you need to make sure, again, like you better be right 4 out of 5 times, right? Like
Yeah.
it, and so that's why I think we go through a very rigorous process in training our PMs and monetization teams, and so it is very difficult to just because you have the tools to do it doesn't mean everybody needs to go wild and just start making a bunch of changes to the game.
Yeah.
But I think if you look at SciPlay again 3 to 5 years ago, we were almost so far on the other side where we may not have been as reactive as we needed to
Hmm.
be, and so we invested a ton in making us top of the social casino chain at being super reactive, and we are still super
Yeah.
reactive. But there are times where I'm not going to say that we haven't made mistakes in being too reactive to things. So there's a balance to all of this, and I think we're constantly, even myself, checking ourselves to say, okay, maybe we need to pull back this way a little bit, and
Yeah.
it's a constant struggle there. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, like let's say you have the capability to make decisions in real time. That doesn't mean that you should be making decisions in real time in
we
any
do, and
situation of life.
we do, and I can tell you, like this year has been a great one for us to learn. I think that's where, like, uh, we don't have any egos here. Like
Mhm.
it's so much about, it's okay to fail, but we better learn from our mistakes. Like it's very rarely that we have individuals, even myself, like we're not making the same mistake twice. Like
Yeah.
we'll fail, we'll learn. Like I think we talked about Josh a little bit already, but like his one of his favorite quotes is like, let's fail fast, right? And so don't don't allow yourself 6 months to fail. Like if you're gonna fail in that week and learn from it and move on to the next thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, kind of back to my point. I got like sidetracked with a quick decision making. But the other investment that you did was unified infrastructure for game decision. Essentially,
yep,
what it means is you've instead of making all the features from the startup from all the different games, you've kind of unified the ways you're building in a more modular way, which just makes sense. If you're doing battle pass and or similar mechanic in one of your games, it should be compatible almost directly, at least on the back end and on
sure,
the like the code side, so that it
for
can be
sure,
just made look different than another one. But the third element, what I want to talk about, was direct to consumer empowerment that Josh talked about, and
sure.
that's essentially web shops, right? And
That is correct.
controlling your relationship with the customer. And we've seen like social casino has been really on the forefront of this, but mid-core companies, especially the ones with strategy games and RPG games, have really been making significant investment into direct-to-consumer technology or approach, or however you want to talk about it. But like, how big of part of your business has that been since the investment?
Yeah, so this year was a big year for us in that category. What I will say is we always wanted to do what we always want to do was best for the player, right? And so we're very strategic in how we go about, creating a direct to consumer platform. And so we've ran multiple tests on multiple games with different cohorts of players. And the reality is that you have to be super careful about how you send people, when you send people, and I'm not sure a lot of companies have done a lot of due diligence on that side, um, and so we're very careful on how we do it, and I think like that's been a big learning point for us because I've also heard other strategies of like, oh well, it's just free AEBITA. Why wouldn't we do it? Let's just get this
Yeah.
web shop out there and send everybody to that platform. And I'll tell you, like it is again, it can be a very dangerous thing if you're not doing it in a very correct way. So we're always keeping our players, top of mind. And I think we're focused on growing our overall business. Obviously, we're in a market where EBITDA and profit is incredibly important, but we're always top of mind of growing our overall business. You know, the top line and the bottom line. So
And as any casino or social casino company, especially, you probably have really good customer relationship management already existing, and so that helps with since you already have that direct relationship with the customer, it helps with direct selling, of course, of different packages.
Absolutely. Like it's, in this market, you are dealing with players that are, very much, actual players, in the real world, right? And so, um, you know, you're working almost in a hospitality industry as
Yeah.
well, which makes our industry a little bit different from the others because these players are used to receiving hospitality in the real world. I can tell you, much like myself, like
Hmm.
I am a huge Vegas person, so to call it, right? I absolutely love it. It's where, and I think it's because we have to be players ourselves. How are you supposed to understand, what a player is doing if you can't feel that yourself? Like, but I've always been that way with anything. Like, if you, whatever your profession is, like if you sell knives, you should use the knife, right?
Yeah.
If you, whatever you do, if you sell cars, you should sit in the car and drive it and understand it. Like, so I think we're very, very passionate on individuals feeling what our players feel.
Yeah. So if you live it, you have to love it.
You, you do like that's.
Yeah.
I think that's us to a T,
Yeah.
for sure.
Um, and so this is interesting. So talking about like, actually, no, I have a question. Who is the social casino player? Because like, is it very U.S. focused audience?
So we are a very U.S. Heavy company.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. But one of the second largest, demographics is over in Australia, and so um, Australia obviously is a fairly large country, and you know, social casino is a big market over there, and so that is a market that we're certainly breaking into, which is exciting. And there's more to come on that in the future, but um, we are predominantly North America based, but we are doing things to break to other countries. I think the thing that we're learning is like you can't run games the same way that you would in necessarily North America. There's a different strategy. There's a different fatui that you have to do. There's different content that is more successful, and we're happy to partner with our businesses at Light and Wonder, because this is an industry that they absolutely know. And so I think that's what makes us very powerful as a business is, we're a content company,
Hmm.
together with Light and Wonder. And so we're constantly using over the last 2 years where we have an amazing partnership with them and we're learning a ton on both sides of the business. So it's really is a great partnership.
So learning from the real casino, or
For
like I
sure.
wouldn't say
For sure.
real casino, but like what do you call it for? Because
I mean, look, it's interesting because SciPlay, like we own our players, right?
yeah.
At Light and Wonder, they are a content company, right? They make these slot machines, and their customers are the casino, operators themselves, and so
Hmm.
um, to be able to look at both sides of that coin is really powerful, and we're excited about that. So.
And how does the like I assume that a lot of the cooperation, not cooperation, because you were saying the company, but a lot of the knowledge sharing goes probably through the different machines that are working, or different technologies. Is it like you can test something really quickly digitally and bring it back physically, or vice versa? There are some machines that are hot currently in Vegas, and you
It's
bring them again in some kind of a form to your digital platform.
Yeah, it's vice versa. Like we released a stat the other year at G2E. 93% of SciPlay players go to the casino at least once a year, and it was, I think, 20 times a year was like 60+%, right? So
Wow.
there's a massive crossover. And I'll tell you, we had two machines that were social first games actually launch on land this year, and we have much more coming. And so we're actually really coming together on our product roadmap, our strategy with how we release machines. Do you release them at the same time? Like we've learned so much over the last really 2.5 years, and I think that Matt Wilson, our CEO at Light and Wonder, it's certainly one of their large initiatives, and our CEO Josh, like and Matt, and together with a number of us at SciPlay, are working phenomenally together to grow the overall business, and SciPlay is a big piece of that. So
Mm. And so before shit, I want to ask like two different questions. One
yeah,
is
go
actually
ahead.
I'll ask this first because like whenever like I remember working at Zynga, and casino was naturally a big part of the business.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of the stuff was the machines, or even like separate games were launched with like Game of Thrones slots and so forth, with
Yeah.
like a big IP. Is that still the strategy that you're seeing, or are these more like these IP integrations more launched inside of the existing casino games?
Um, I would say it's hard to say that IPs, less or more important than it is, today. I think there's because Frankenstein, we actually just launched on all of our platforms in the last week for Halloween. Like
Of course.
timed it up pretty perfect, right? Um, but Universal has been an amazing partner for us, both on the land-based casino and in our casinos as well, and as well with Hasbro and our Monopoly casino. And
Mhm.
so I think that we take a more directed approach to IP. I think back in the day, you would, especially with the Zynga products, like you saw IPs all over the board. I mean, there was tons of
Yes.
we had tons of them too, and I think what we learned is that when you take a directed approach and you're working directly with the IP holder on creating a great slot machine game, like that's where it does incredible. And we've seen a lot of growth there. But we are very strategic again on how we use these brands. And so that's what I'd say on the IP front.
Yeah, it just sounds like to make a whole separate game with an IP, just with a revenue share and everything. It's kind of like you can't go back. Where versus if it's a machine, you can run it for 6 months, you can take it out, you can come
Yeah,
back again with a new iteration inside that one bigger app, and then you're using that IP to grow your existing app rather than putting all your eggs and baskets in this joint venture of an app.
for sure. And I think, the other thing is like, go if you go walk around a casino floor, you're gonna see all these different thematic elements, right?
Hmm.
And if you're just trying to go after one theme for the player, like I think it's very hard for a player to live just within that theme. Like, even our game like Monopoly has a number of
Yeah.
different themed games with inside of it, because slot players they're very superstitious, right? Like if they are playing one game, like they may not say, you know what, like my Oriental machines, like they're not working today, so I'm gonna go switch to my more cartoony character machines, or I'm gonna go switch to, a three-pot game, or you could
Yeah.
go on and on about. Now we do know that players do. They're very much like they like the machine that they like, and they'll spend a lot of time on that specific machine. but they'll have 3 or 4 that they always keep in the back pocket to go, hey, I'm not hitting here. I'm going to move to the next one. So
And this is something that I remember back from Zynga days, is that people played about like five different machines of or they would play back in the days. I remember they would play like what, almost up to five different casino apps.
five different social casino apps.
Yes, yeah, and then
So
switch when
that,
one goes cold.
yep. And so like the data is always a little muddy there. I can tell you that it's probably changed a little bit to where it's a little bit less because the games have become so much deeper
Hmm.
than what they were back then. But we do know that many of our players play multiple social casino games, sometimes even within our own portfolio, and sometimes not, right? And so and they do like, but and they'll play one game, maybe two, because it's it has a specific slot machine in it, or they play that game where they don't pay any money in, right? But typically they're spending in one, maybe two, and so you're really hoping to get the bulk of their session in the game that they love. So it's social casino players are interesting like that, and a lot of the members that that we talk about and talk with our players, like their phone absolutely has multiple social casino games. I can tell you that my own phone has multiple casino games because I actually
Of
I
course.
love, like, I don't do it because I work in the industry. I love playing social casino games, so it's because it's like it's my zen time where I'm sitting there watching a football game at night, and you know social casino is almost can sometimes be a very idle experience where you're playing through the meta, but you're sitting there on auto spin, allowing your game to play through that meta while you're auto spinning or idling, so to say.
Yeah, yes. And the people who don't play these games or don't know the audience really well, I've noticed that they have sort of a like a sad perception of people who play social casino games.
They
It's like,
do.
and like I'll give an example. I remember, like, since you talked about Australia, so my brother-in-law is Australian, and as a family, now we were in the on a beach there, and his friend is like a successful founder, sold his company, like all that jazz. And I remember he spent at least like he was on the beach like 2 hours just playing social casino game, and I had to ask him, like, dude, like what did you play and how? Like, yeah, I spent a couple of $100, and he just enjoyed himself, just just
Yep.
playing this social casino game, and he was not a loser. He was not like he was as as nice of a lad or a bloke or whatever they call him, a mate, as you can
Yeah.
find. But that was just his, exactly as you portrayed. He was like that was his pastime. Just a couple of
It's
hours, just
it,
relaxing.
it's entertainment,
Yeah,
and I think that that's when people ask us who our competitors are, of course we have competitors within our space, but we look at our competitors as Netflix, or really anything that is going out to dinner could be a competitor of ours, right?
yeah,
Like, because ultimately, um, a person's time is that's the one thing that nobody can buy, right? And so you're ultimately trying to engage and entertain them during their free time. And so
yeah.
but yes, we are very aware of the sentiment of social casino, but at the end of the day, we're game makers. That's what we do. We make games, and regardless of if it's a social casino game, a match three, like the game loops are similar but different in ways.
Hmm.
But ultimately, games are games.
Yeah.
And that's the way we look at stuff.
Well, talking about like loving, creating these games and enjoying social casino. And by social casino, we mean like bingo, poker, like all of that.
Yep.
So how do you like make new machines, make new games, improve your games? Like, what's the innovation process, if you will, like at SciPlay?
Yeah, so I think the innovation things in the market are the things that you can't see. Um, And we talk about a lot of this internally, where even individuals say, well, maybe we're not innovative enough. And I always ask that question, like, what do you mean by innovative? Do you not believe innovative is how we have created real-time metrics? Do we not believe innovative, like, those are the things that I think are the most innovative things in today's industry. It's going back to, just because you're not innovating this brand new feature that the whole market ends up taking, that's not the only thing that is innovative. It's actually how you operate your game, how you think, how you grow, how you org. Like, all of this is where I would say SciPlay is extremely innovative in.
Yeah. So the operational aspect of the work,
Oh,
right?
where I would say, again, we can't see into any other company's crystal ball there either,
Yeah.
but we're extremely innovative on that front. We're very proud to have the operational innovation that we do. So
Yeah, and like I just remember these six elements that Joshua talked about in the last podcast. Part of it was this talent investment. So really, emphasizing homegrown talent like you are at
yeah,
SciPlay. I think you had a stint somewhere else in like midcore, but then you came
I,
back.
yeah. No, for me, like, I say this all the time too. Like, I'm probably one of 50 people that have left and came back SciPlay. Like, I always say, like, people don't return that to companies that suck, right? And SciPlay is a pretty cool place, and we have so many people that like myself. I wanted to work on a different genre of game, right?
Hmm.
And knowing Josh for as long as I did, I remember I went to him. I'm like, hey, like, I love mobile RPGs. Like, I got to go try this out. And he was totally like, dude, seriously, go do it. This is the time to go do it. And so I was at Boss Fight for about a year and a half. Those guys deserve a lot of credit for helping me grow, because they helped me
Hmm.
see a totally different side of games. And I think they would say the same, is that they were so, like, design focused, and we had to bring it almost the other way. So um, there was a lot of learning there. I felt like that's where I learned how to actually make games, right? And able to bring that back to SciPlay was amazing. And so then I was at Play Studios for a couple of years, which is a competitor of ours, and love those guys dearly too. And I've been very, very lucky to have been surrounded by such amazing people in my career. And I think I hope that everybody listening to this can think about the people that they surround themselves with, because that's, at the end of the day, when your career is all said and done, like, those are going to be the things that you remember.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, working with the people you want to work, that's
At,
an important
at
part.
some point that when you're early in your career, you're worried about so many different things, whether it's compensation,
Hmm.
title, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, like, for me, it and for many, many side players, it's really all about working with the people that you love, and so that's what we are all about, and that's our retention policy.
Well, part of that, part of your talent investment, and part of working with the people you like is that you also work on site, right?
We do. So
So you
we're
tried the whole other thing, and then you're like, okay, this is the way
we
that we
did,
want to
and
work.
we did, and I think one of the KPIs that I'll tell you is, before we had announced our back to office, we had about 70% of the studio already in, and that was totally up to them at that point. I think there's those of us that almost had to be in, because we're like, oh my gosh, like, Kylie, my wife, and my two kids, like, they're running around like crazy. The dogs are barking. UPS it's like, I just myself, and again many other side players, like, they just wanted to be around people, because
Yeah.
that's who we are. Like, we're like tonight, we have Fridays, actually work from home day. We have probably 50 people in the studio, and we'll go out and head out for dinner with the group after tonight, and like that's who we are. So
Yeah, I like how it's like almost controversial that you have to
yeah, right. Like
explain. Oh
it,
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're radical when we
yeah,
come to the office.
it's weird. And look, like when we made the decision, there were of course you know sides of it, and people really just wanted to know
Mm,
the why behind it, and so I think we were able to explain that in a very positive way. And then once we got everybody back, like there was a number of people who may have questioned it a little bit up front, and I had many people come to me afterwards and are like, "Thank you so much, like for bringing us back." Sometimes I just needed that little jolt, and I can tell you, like it's made us an even more successful company because, again, going back to who we are and where we started, that's who we are as a company, and that's our competitive advantage is our culture, and being in office together just made that so critical.
yeah, oh, of course, of course. I think there's really nothing to it. Every company is now doing at least hybrid. Like nobody's talking
Right,
about remote. I mean,
right.
there are certain companies and startups maybe try to compete through that, which is pretty tough. Like you're choosing a not optimal way to work to compete
Man,
with
it's
those who are
like
bigger.
you know better than anybody. Like it's so when you're working on games in a
Mhm.
like creative environment, like how many times have you seen, a feature when you're traveling and you can't put it in your hands and touch it and feel it, or you can't, it's just, or when you're sitting in a room and somebody says that one thing, or even makes body language where you're just like, those are the things that are so critical to making games, in my opinion. So we're very passionate on that front.
Yeah, I this kind of brings me. I remember working with a company, and they were in a prototyping phase, and
Yeah.
it wasn't going as well as it could be, and I was like, I was in the call, I was like, is everybody remote? Like they
Right.
were in the same city. They were in the same
Right.
city,
Yeah.
but I was like we're having this call and you're not in the same office and this is a
Yeah. It's
prototyping phase. Like, can you like? And they're like, yeah, we're working remotely.
yeah.
So you're prototyping even though you live in the same city.
Yep.
And I was like, okay,
And I think
interesting. And then just wrote down like this kind of change.
and I think the thing that makes us what we are is because we're not afraid to make the decisions that nobody else is, right?
Yeah.
We made our in office decision, you know, almost I think is greater than 2 years ago now. And so nobody was doing it at that point. We
Yeah.
made the decision to move monetization of product. We know that many companies, many Israeli companies are absolutely doing that, but it's very rare to do it in the US, and we hope to be at the front of that. So I think there's a lot of credit, that Josh, deserves there to, and the executive team in general, to make the calls that nobody else is. We're not afraid to do what's right for the business and the people, which I think makes us special.
Yeah, I mean, when you make a decision, you'd like to make decisions always that everybody else likes, that
For
everybody
sure.
cheers. And sometimes, you're in a phase where you have to make the right decision that might not be the right for everybody. It's the right
Absolutely.
for the majority, but it's not. But there's going to be people who are upset, people who built their plans and their lives around, for example, remote work, and that's unfortunate.
Yes.
But nevertheless, as a business, like I understand that type of decision making. And it's very difficult when it turns like somebody can get to be remote, somebody else can't, and
Yep.
so forth. Like rather than making a one decision. But anyways, I want
Absolutely.
to talk about kind of like your growth on the other side because another part of the discussion last time was strategic acquisitions for synergy, as
Yep.
well as diversification with core focus. So
Yep.
acquisition, pretty clear. Like you acquired Electus from
Yep.
Turkey. I think there were some other companies as well, and that's diversification with a core focus. This was interesting because this was what Joshua was talking about before Monopoly Go. So it's
Yep.
essentially taking social casino learnings, social casino core that is proven to retain and monetize,
Yep.
but enter markets which are not typical social casino players. So what Monopoly Go did, you probably looked
Yep.
at it and be like, God damn it! Like we even have
Yeah.
the
Right.
Monopoly IP.
Yeah. Exactly.
So can you talk a little bit about like the evolution of social casino and especially this sort of a diversification while still having the core of a social casino?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, our core products are our bread and butter. That's I think we've proven to the market that's
Mm-hmm.
what we're good at, and that's what we'll continue to be good at. And we have a very healthy investment path, on our core products. The other side of it is the investment that we have, in a game like Match Hotel. So coming from the Elictus studio, our Turkey studio, and
Yeah.
so um, you know, the obviously we all kind of understand what has happened to hyper casual gaming. Obviously, when IDFA came out, it became a little bit more difficult to run in that way, and so
Yeah. A
we
lot
have
more difficult.
yeah, exactly. But the pivot that studio has been able to make to go from hyper casual, and we're almost, I guess, could call a little bit of a new genre of you know hyper casual meets a little bit of social casino or casual itself, and so
Hmm.
Match Hotel, should definitely go out and play it. It's an amazing game. It's a kind of a picker, so to say it, but very very fun. And we're very excited about its performance in the early stages. And we're even doing it on the social casino side with a game like Dancing Drums, which is our IAA only casino as well. So as we continue to innovate in those sides of the market, I think we're going to see some really good growth areas there as well. So
Yeah, interesting. So you like this is not part of the. I was just opening up like App Charge. Sorry, App Charge. App Magic actually. Just
yeah,
looking uh, at the other data. So it's like it's still under its own publishing IP. It's not under SciPlay published.
yeah, technically, I think that will change over time. Obviously,
Hmm.
during all of it, it's you're making sure that you align culturally with the studio, which 100%. Like I haven't had the chance to be over there, but everything that I've heard from all the members that have been over there has been absolutely amazing, and so we're 100% aligned there. And then you have all the other stuff that you have to get done as part of an acquisition, and so
Yeah.
some of the things lag. But what we're focused on is culturally, is the studio aligned with us? 100% they are, and then ultimately making sure that we get performance from the games in the ways that we see it. And so we're very excited about the things that they're working on over there.
And this is of course not a new strategy for social casino or a casino company to enter adjacent genres. I mean, Playtika, Aristocrat
Yep.
is a good example, of course,
Yeah.
with that. Like, how are you doing this differently, and what kind of a learnings are you taking from your rivals?
I'll tell you one big difference, and again, we don't know exactly the thought process behind the other companies are, but what we said ourselves is, 4 years ago, when we were public, there was a lot of feedback for us on like, you guys got to do different games, you guys got to do
Yeah,
different games. Social
diversify your
casinos,
portfolio.
yeah, yeah. Social casino is going to be flat. I think we've been hearing that for years, and we said, you know what, like to your point, SciPlay right now, I think we're about 11.5%, and we're the third developer in social casino market. Like 50%, 60% of the social casino market is wide open, and so like our focus is going to continue on gaining market share in this market, and I think that it's something that we will never lose. And we feel like some other companies may have said, and looked at some shiny new objects and almost neglected their social casino portfolio. And I think if we would have done that, that would have been a massive mistake for us. And so, in fact, it's been somewhat of a good thing that maybe some other companies did that, because we were able to gobble up more market share in the last 3 years, right? And so, our focus is always going to be, in our core products. But as we continue to grow and as we continue to learn, we'll scale where we believe is necessary. So,
Yeah, and you're also not like, you don't have to per se generate an investor narrative by diversifying your portfolio, etc., to show growth, because you're already a part of a larger company,
absolutely.
Light and Wonder. So you kind of don't have to do things for the sake of pleasing analysts. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And I think, there's a lot of good there. And we've gotten a lot of amazing advice over the years too. But ultimately, again, we have to make the decisions that are best for us and the wider family of Light and Wonder. And so we're very much aligned with the two groups of how we run and operate our products, what our growth strategy is. It's really an amazing partnership with Light and Wonder. So,
All right, Cameron, before I let you go, I have two questions.
yeah,
These are easy ones.
yeah, yeah.
So number one is, what if you'd have to share or help somebody who's from outside social casino with the learnings of social casino in terms of live operation, retention, monetization, you name it, running successful games, like, what are the key learnings or key insights you would share? Like, how would you advise them?
I think number one, I would say, like, forget about all the stuff that you've learned in the last 10 years. Don't throw it all away, but like, be willing to rethink, retest, and kind of turn a new leaf on how to operate your games. I think the market has drastically changed, and we all need to change with it. And I think the games have come to a place where operational awareness is critical. It's not necessarily all about the next best feature. It's how you operate them. I think that's number one. And then I think number two is how the industry looks at talent. I think we're always trying to, it kind of goes with number one, but we're always trying to look at, like, you know, where, where we're trying to find the best resume, so to say. And I think that although that's very important, I think you have to look internally to how people think. And when you're interviewing people and training people and evaluating talent, it's so much more about how people think rather than, what they know. And so we're really, like leaning in that direction of making sure that, our interview processes, the way we train people, like, it's finding those critical thinkers. It's finding those passionate, hardworking individuals that has been most successful for us.
Got it. And the last question is, like, well, you kind of touched upon it a couple of times, but like, what makes SciPlay a good place to work?
um, Look, I think if you want to join a place that's, fast paced, where you're going to, drink from a fire hose and learn more than anything you've learned in the past, number of careers or number of years that you've been in this industry, like, SciPlay is that place. If you want to work with intelligent people who are passionate about what they do, who, culturally are going to high five you in the hallway and give you a hug when they see you, like, that's who SciPlay is. We are, we're a very open culture. We're very, again, excitement is the phrase that I'll use. Like, and if you want to see people's faces, like, that's who we are, because we're back in the office and we're proud of that. So,
Well, that's so SciPlay is the third time you guys are on the podcast, And there's a reason for it, because I think you're very methodical, very structured company in a way you approach and make decisions and grow your business. And especially by focusing not on the shiny object outside, but the fundamentals of the business and the infrastructure of it, the boring, tools, tech, platform, things that make you run, rather than the newest features. So always a pleasure to have you on. And I want to give a shout out in the end. Normally it's the shout out of the guest, but I'm going to give a shout out to Matt Thompson, who's director of product at SciPlay. He's an old colleague of mine from back from Zynga days. So down there in Austin, Texas.
Yeah. He's actually he's in Mexico right now.
I do not doubt that at all. I know Matt Thompson pretty well.
We had our QBRs yesterday, and he popped in. It was like, Matt, you're on vacation in Mexico, but no, he's an amazing dude. Like we're so lucky to have him, and he survived his first development conference, so he's here to stay now.
That's good. I'm happy for him, and happy for everybody. I'm not going to tell anything more about my relationship with Matt Thompson.
We'll stop there.
So
that's awesome.
So anyway, Cam, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. Can't wait to have more people from SciPlay really to learn about your business and because it's like fundamentally very well functioning. So that's very interesting.
Next time you're in the U.S., like please hit us up. Love to grab a drink or go out to dinner. Like be great. So
in Vegas, hopefully.
Yes. And then after that, we won't talk for a few days. We'll be like, all right, I've had my time.
Sounds like my time with Matt Thompson.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, well, Cam, thanks again for hopping on a podcast and sharing all the insights.
Absolutely. Well, we very much appreciate it, and we're huge fans of your guys' show. So keep doing an amazing job.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.
You did it. You made it to the end of the episode. As a fan of the show, it would help us out if you'd subscribe and leave us a review on the podcast service of your choice. Those stars and likes, while a small action on your part, mean a lot to us and help to grow the show. More importantly, are you a member of the Deconstructor of Fun Slack group? If you have 5 years or more of games industry experience, go to deconstructoroffun.com/Slack and apply to join. Join the games industry best professional community filled with peers always willing to lend a hand, or subscribe to our newsletter to get all the latest insights from the Deconstructor of Fun content creators. Thanks for listening.